My brother asked if he could stay with us just for a few weeks after his breakup. 3 months later, he hadn't paid a single dollar, copied our house keys without permission, and even tried to make our home his permanent address. When I finally told him he had to pay rent or move out, he called me greedy and heartless. But what he didn't realize is that I was already planning my revenge. If you've ever had someone take advantage of your kindness, or if you know the pain of being used by your own family, you'll understand exactly why this story hits so hard. Hit like, subscribe, and stick with me, because by the end, you'll see how I turned his freeloading into the sweetest revenge. Just a few weeks. That's what Ryan said, standing in our doorway with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and an expression that mixed heartbreak with entitlement, the kind of look that begged for sympathy, but carried an undertone of expectation. Behind him, the dusk sky was a heavy slate gray, threatening rain. My husband, Mark, exchanged a glance with me. He hesitated for only a second before stepping aside. "Of course, man. Come in." Ryan gave him a grateful smile, the corners of his mouth twitching like he knew this wasn't generosity so much as inevitability. Families don't really say no when one of their own shows up at the door with breakup baggage. At least, that's what Ryan was counting on. A few weeks, I repeated in my head. That sounded manageable. Short term. A bridge between chapters. I told myself it would be fine. The first week almost was fine. I cooked pasta the night he arrived. Ryan told the breakup story between mouthfuls, seasoning it with just enough self-pity to earn comfort. Mark topped off his glass of water and patted his shoulder. "You can breathe here," he said warmly. And Ryan did, loudly, too loudly. For 3 months, our home began learning him before I did. It learned the sharp clack of a game controller echoing past midnight, the bluish wash of a gaming monitor turning the living room into a nightclub, the clatter of cereal bowls left in the sink to fossilize. It learned the drag of slippers across the hallway, the muffled laughter of Discord calls, the sweet, sour tang of fast food left open on the counter overnight. It also learned the silence when he said, "I'll Venmo you later," and never did. The silence when the Wi-Fi bill doubled. The silence of an envelope from the electric company with numbers higher than last month. By the end of week 2, I floated the idea of a contribution. "Once you're settled," I began carefully, folding my voice into polite shapes, "maybe you could pitch in a little. $200 a month for groceries and utilities. It's nothing compared to rent out there." Ryan didn't even look up from his phone. He said, "Family doesn't charge family," with the casual certainty of someone citing scripture. Then he chuckled. "You should be glad to help me out till I'm back on my feet." Back on his feet. I glanced at his sneakers kicked off in the hallway, untouched since he arrived. Mark later whispered, "Maybe give him some time," but my stomach was already nodding.
Mark tried the diplomatic route one Saturday morning. Ryan was in the kitchen, headphones hanging around his neck, cereal half soggy in a bowl. "Hey man," Mark said gently, rinsing his own mug, "could you maybe grab your dishes today? The sink's been filling up." Ryan didn't look up. "Chill, dude, I'll get it." Mark told me later the word chill sat in his throat like a fish bone. He didn't push. He just carried his own plates to the sink with deliberate care, modeling the behavior like you would for a child who wasn't watching. We kept accommodating. That's the problem with family. You bend until you don't realize you're already crooked. By the 3rd month, my patience cracked. The bills were climbing. The fridge was emptying faster than I could fill it. The guest room smelled like damp towels and energy drinks. $200, I said firmly one evening, standing in the doorway of his room. My arms were crossed, the voice in my throat finally steady. "Starting next week for groceries and utilities. That's less than half of what you'd pay anywhere else." Ryan paused his game, pushing his headset down. "You're serious?" "Completely," he laughed. Not the light, easy kind, but sharp and mocking. "Wow, greedy much? I can't believe you're nickel and diming your own brother." The word greedy struck me like a slap. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted metal. Later that night, Mark found me staring at the bills spread across the table. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I hate feeling like the villain in my own home. Like asking for respect makes me cruel." "You're not cruel," he said, resting a hand on mine. You're tired of being taken advantage of. And he was right. Compassion and enabling share a costume. But sooner or later, the mask slips.
2 hours later, the phone rang. "Mom," I answered. Her voice was already heated. "How could you? He just broke up with his girlfriend. He's family. You should be ashamed of yourself." "It's been 3 months, Mom." "So what? Family doesn't charge family. What's $200 to you anyway?" "It's not about the money," I said quietly. "It's about respect. He's working part-time, spending on games and takeout, and we're left paying for everything else." "You sound just like your father," she snapped. "Cold, practical. I didn't raise you to turn your back on blood." When the call ended, I stood in the kitchen with the lights too bright, the silence pressing down heavy. My reflection in the microwave looked like a stranger, drawn, tired, ashamed for something I didn't do. Mark set a mug of tea in front of me. "She called me too, said I should be a man and cover your greed." I let out a broken laugh. "Did you tell her we already are?" His eyes softened. "Some people only see the bill when you finally hand it to them." That night, Ryan sulked around like a storm cloud, muttering lines for me to overhear. "Might as well live in my car. Guess money's more important than family." I brushed my teeth with the bathroom door open, letting the faucet drown out his performance. In the mirror, my face looked like someone who had done the math, who had realized the line between kindness and being used isn't drawn until your foot's already over it. Before bed, I slipped a note under his door, 200 on the 1st, or a move-out plan by the 30th. "Love you, M." I lingered for a moment, hand pressed against the wood, listening. The guest room creaked, his chair scraped, then faintly, the hall closet door opening, metal clinking, our spare keys. My stomach tightened. He wasn't planning a contribution. He was planning something else. The spare keys went missing the way trust does. Quietly, without warning, like a light dimming one notch at a time. I didn't mention it that night. I told myself I'd misheard the closet door, that the faint jingle of metal wasn't real, that maybe I was just paranoid. Sometimes the small lie you feed yourself is easier than the sharp truth. But the truth always waits. The next morning, Ryan was already in the kitchen. He stood barefoot in the middle of the mess, scrolling on his phone with one hand and scraping eggs in my best nonstick pan with a metal fork in the other. The fork screeched against the surface, leaving lines I'd never buff out. "Morning," he said casually, eyes never leaving the screen. "We out of hot sauce?" "In the pantry," I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. "And please don't use metal on that pan." He clicked the fork twice. Click, click, like punctuation, before finally swapping it for a wooden spoon. Not because he cared, but because I'd noticed. Then my eyes landed on his keyring tossed onto the counter. Alongside his car key and gym fob, there was a brass stranger, shining smug in the morning light. "You get a new key?" I asked, feigning curiosity, though my heart had already dropped. "Yeah," he said without hesitation. "Made a copy. You guys keep weird hours, and I don't want to wake you up when I come in late." "From where?" He smirked at his phone. "Placers." Mark walked in then, hair damp from his shower, kissed my temple, and said nothing. His silence told me he saw it too. We were collecting these silences like overdue bills. From that day on, Ryan's confidence grew bolder. The key wasn't just metal, it was permission. He came and went at all hours, doors clicking at 2:14 a.m., 3:07 a.m., even midday when he should have been at work. Sometimes he left the deadbolt open, sometimes the chain unlocked, sometimes the door itself ajar enough for a breeze to slip in. The safety of my own home no longer felt like mine. He narrated his movements as if that excused them. "Heading out," he'd call over his shoulder, already halfway through the door. "Back later." Or, "Claire's brother's got this insane gaming setup, gonna grind ranked for a bit." The axe was back in his orbit, if not by title, then by presence. And when he stayed in, our living room transformed. It happened on a Friday. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, 2 young men I'd never seen were standing there,
carrying a bag of wings dripping orange grease. Ryan said it was cool, one of them said before I could answer, stepping right past me. They sank into our couch like it belonged to them, spreading controllers and napkins across the table. The room smelled of buffalo sauce and sweat before 10 minutes had passed. Shoes off, I said out of habit, but they didn't hear me, or pretended not to. From the kitchen, Ryan called, "Babe, it's fine. We'll clean up." They didn't. At 1 in the morning, I found Mark loading the dishwasher while Ryan cackled at the TV, oblivious to the bones and greasy napkins piling around him. By 2, the coffee table looked like a landfill. The next morning, I discovered a wing bone fused to a coaster by dried sauce. I peeled it off slowly, listening to the tacky sound like evidence. At breakfast, Ryan announced, "They loved it here. Sick setup. They'll probably swing by Wednesdays, too." I stared at him. Ask first. Always. He smirked. Chill. You know I've got you. The campaign to make me the villain didn't stop at our walls. Mom texted, "Family dinner Sunday. We need to talk." It wasn't a dinner. It was a tribunal. She served roast chicken on her best plates, her apron still on like she was auditioning for the role of martyr. Ryan sat tall, playing the wronged party to perfection. "I hear you're charging rent?" Mom began. $200, I said. After 3 months of food and utilities. Mom's lips pressed thin. "When your father lost his job in '98, we didn't send family a bill." Mark leaned in. "This isn't crisis help anymore. This is a lifestyle," Ryan snorted. "Wow, way to talk about me like I'm a disease." I turned on him. "You've been here 91 days. You copied our keys without asking. You bring people over at midnight without telling us. Do you hear yourself?" "Paranoid," he said, rolling his eyes. "I was making life easier for you," I snapped. "Only for you." Mom's spoon clinked against porcelain. "Enough. Love is not an invoice." I met her eyes. Love isn't a bottomless tab either. Ryan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Hear that? She's corporate now." The word corporate landed like a branding iron. Practical, cold, spreadsheet sister. My cheeks burned. When dinner ended, Mom embraced Ryan long, whispering in his ear. Then she turned to me, her grip on my arm steadying. "He's fragile. You could give grace." I already have. For 3 months. Grace is not the same as being used. Her face hardened. She let go. It felt like judgment. On the ride home, Mark drove in silence until finally he said, "We're not crazy. We're not cruel." I know, but knowing didn't stop me from feeling like the villain everyone else saw.
When we pulled into the driveway, Ryan's car was already there, crooked across both spaces. Lights glowed in every window, kitchen, guest room, living room, like the house itself was warning us. Inside, I found him at the counter tearing open a package with my name on it. "Finally," he said, pulling out the new router I'd ordered. "This'll be clutch. Our ping has been trash." "Our ping?" I repeated slowly. Mark stepped forward. "That's not yours to open." Ryan blinked, genuinely surprised at the resistance. "You're serious?" "Very." He set the router down with exaggerated care, then grinned. "Mom already told me I can stay as long as I need. Family decided." "Family decided?" Mark repeated. Ryan tapped his brass key on the counter. Tink, tink, tink. "Yeah, no rent, no deadline. I'll even put the Wi-Fi password on the fridge." That was the moment I realized Ryan wasn't just overstaying. He was staking a claim. I walked to the fridge, pulled down the whiteboard marker, and wrote in thick block letters, "House meeting. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., non-negotiable." Ryan chuckled. "What is this, HR?" "No," I said, meeting his smirk with steel. "It's the last time I ask nicely." He spun the key on his finger. Confident. Tink, tink, tink. The orbit looked unbreakable, but all orbits decay. Gravity always wins. And when he saluted me mockingly and said, "Don't be late," I realized the question wasn't if we'd have a reckoning. It was how hard I was willing to make the landing. The morning of the house meeting, I woke before the alarm. The house was still, that heavy quiet before tension breaks. I moved through the kitchen like a soldier setting a battlefield. Coffee measured perfectly, utility bills laid out, screenshots of ignored Venmo requests printed in black and white. On a single page, I typed up 4 lines titled, "House Agreement. $200 due on the 1st, utilities and food, guests by request only, quiet after 10 p.m., no duplicated keys, doors locked. If you can't agree, move out by the 30th. At the bottom, a blank line for his signature. Boundaries, not an execution order. Mark sat across from me, rubbing his jaw. It's simple. Fair. Watch him call it corporate, I muttered. He smiled faintly. Let him. We're allowed to be grown-ups in our own house. By mid-morning, Ryan was awake, shirtless, music blaring from his phone. He strolled into the kitchen like a tenant paying rent, not a guest burning our groceries. He grabbed juice from the fridge and drank straight from the carton. Morning, he said casually. We ought a cereal? I shut the fridge door behind him. We're out of patience. He grinned like I was joking, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and wandered off. His keys clinked on the counter, brass glinting like an uninvited guest. The door slammed behind him when he left, deadbolt undone. I relocked it, the click sounding more like defiance than security. The hours before the meeting stretched thin. At 3 o'clock, the mail brought proof Ryan didn't see as proof at all. A USPS change of address slip with his name scrawled across it, our home listed as permanent. Paperwork is a kind of spell. He was writing permanence into existence. I snapped a photo. Mark stood in the doorway, jaw tight. Keep documenting, he said. He thinks he's clever. By 6, the pot roast was done, filling the house with garlic and bay leaf. Cooking was the only thing that still made me feel in control. But as I stirred the gravy, guilt gnawed. What if I'm cruel? What if 200 is too much? What if silence was the kinder choice? But another thought cut sharper. Silence is also a lie, and I've been lying for 3 months.
At 6:59, Ryan sauntered in. Earbuds dangling, gum cracking, he spotted the chairs set around the table, the papers laid out. What is this, Shark Tank? He smirked, dropping into a chair like he owned it. It's our home, I said, and we're talking like adults. He spun the brass key around his finger. Mom's on her way. Told her you're trying to evict me? She says I have rights. The doorbell rang before I could answer. Mom swept in first, and Linda right behind her, perfume like powder and judgment. We're here to mediate, Mom declared, rushing past me. Ryan's grin widened as she kissed his hair. Poor thing, she said to him, but loud enough for me. Mark exhaled slowly, shoulders tense. I slid the house agreement to the center. These are the terms. $200 a month, guests by request, locks engaged, no copied keys. If you can't agree, you move out by the 30th. Ryan leaned forward, grinning. You can't make me. I Googled it. If I get mail here, I'm a tenant. Tenants have rights. He slapped down a printout of renters' rights, highlighter bleeding across the page. Mom's eyes flashed. She can't bully you. Family doesn't treat family this way. Family doesn't use family either, I shot back. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival. Ryan leaned back, smug. You sound like HR. Then he reached into his hoodie and slid something across the table, our spare key. The original. It caught the light and winked. A cruel little star. He found it in the closet, he said. Don't worry, I made a few more, in case I lose this one. Mark's chair scraped against the floor. Mom gasped, but said nothing. I stared at the brass, heartbeat thudding in my ears. That was the line, between home and hostage. Then tonight, I said evenly, we settled this once and for all. Ryan smiled like he'd already won. And then came a knock at the front door. 3 slow, deliberate raps that didn't belong to family. The knock at the door froze us all. 3 heavy raps, deliberate, not the quick impatience of family. Ryan smirked like he'd been expecting backup. That'll be my buddy, he said, standing. Sit down, I ordered. My voice was low, but sharp enough to slice. Mark moved past me and opened the door. Standing on the porch was not a friend, but a stranger in a work polo, clipboard in hand. Package delivery, the man said, holding out another box, addressed to Ryan. Again, Mark took it, nodded thanks, and shut the door harder than necessary. The room stayed silent as Mark set the box on the table next to the house agreement. Another piece of evidence, another weight in the pile. Ryan tore it open immediately, ignoring the papers between us. A mechanical keyboard gleamed in bubble wrap. Sweet, he said, pulling it out. Perfect timing. You can open that later, I snapped. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. Relax, it's just mail. Mail addressed here.
I shot back. Proof you're trying to dig yourself in like a tick. He chuckled, setting the keyboard down with a flourish. Call it what you want. I call it residency. That was it. Something in me cracked, like a bone finally giving under pressure. For 3 months, I'd swallowed the small indignities. The dirty dishes, the late nights, the greasy wing bones on my coffee table. I'd endured the sighs, the muttered insults, the way Mom parroted his victim narrative. I told myself silence was easier, silence was peace, but silence was also a lie. Enough, I said, louder than I meant to. The word hit the room like a slammed door. Everyone stared. Mark sat straighter. Mom blinked. Aunt Linda fidgeted with her purse strap. Even Ryan's grin faltered for half a second. You don't live here, I continued. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. You are a guest who overstayed, a freeloader who copies keys, a manipulator who hides behind Mom, and I'm done being polite.
Ryan leaned back, slow and deliberate, that smirk crawling back onto his face. Wow, there it is. The mask slips. Finally admit you hate me. I don't hate you, I snapped. I hate what you've become. Mom clutched her chest like I'd stabbed her instead. He's your brother. How dare you speak to him like that? How dare he treat our home like a crash pad? I fired back. 3 months, Mom. 3 months of paying for his food, his electricity, his Wi-Fi. 3 months of him mocking us when we asked for basic respect. And you want me to keep swallowing it because we share blood? Aunt Linda whispered, maybe lower your voice. No, I said, standing. I'm done lowering anything. My expectations, my boundaries, my volume. Ryan tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. All this over $200? It's never just about the money, I said. It's about respect. And you've bled us of every ounce. Mark slid the house agreement toward him. His voice was calm steel. Sign it or start packing. You have until the 30th. Ryan shoved the paper back, sending it fluttering to the floor. Not signing anything. You think you can evict me? Try. I'll call the tenant board. You'll lose. Mark's jaw tightened. You're not a tenant. You're a parasite. That word landed like a hammer. Ryan's face flushed red. Say that again. Mark didn't flinch. Parasite. Ryan shot up from his chair so fast, it scraped loud against the floor. For a heartbeat, I thought he might actually swing at Mark. My stomach twisted, legs tensed, ready to move. But instead, he pointed a finger at me. You're the reason I'm here. You're supposed to have my back. But no, you'd rather side with your husband than your own brother. You're greedy, selfish, and cold. The words were knives, but they didn't land the way he thought. Because in that moment, hearing them out loud, I realized that they weren't my shame. They were his. I stepped closer, voice steady now. You're right. I am choosing Mark. I am choosing my marriage. I am choosing my home. Because I won't sacrifice everything I built for someone who thinks family is just a free ride. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Sign the paper or leave tonight. Those are your only options. The room held its breath. Mom whispered, please don't do this. But her voice sounded small. Distant. Ryan's jaw worked like he wanted to spit fire but couldn't find the words. Finally, he grabbed the box with the keyboard, tucked it under his arm, and stormed down the hall. The guest room door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence afterward was thick, heavy, but different. Not permission anymore. Not surrender. It was the silence of a rope pulled taut just before it snaps. I sank into my chair, shaking, adrenaline buzzing through my limbs. Mark reached over, laced his fingers with mine. His touch grounded me. Mom looked at me like I was a stranger. You've changed, she whispered. No, I said, meeting her eyes. I just stopped lying. That night, long after Mom and Aunt Linda left in stiff silence, I walked the hall to the guest room. I stood outside, listening. No gaming sounds, no laughter, just the faint rustle of packing, plastic bags crumpling, drawers shutting shut, and then I heard it, the jingle of keys, more than one. He was arming himself with duplicates, preparing for a war he wasn't willing to fight openly. I turned away, heart pounding, a single thought steady in my mind. The breaking point wasn't tonight. It was still coming, and when it hit, none of us would walk away unchanged. The house after that night was different. Not quieter, Ryan made sure of that, but sharper, like everything had edges now. The slam of his bedroom door, the clatter of dishes, even the way he dragged his slippers down the hallway, it all carried a deliberate weight. He wanted us to feel him everywhere, like a bad smell that wouldn't leave. But beneath his noise, something shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping he'd change or that Mom would see sense. I was planning. It started with a notebook, a plain spiral bound I found in the junk drawer. On the first page, in black pen, I wrote The Record. Every entry was dated. Every note precise. July 5th, Ryan came home at 2:17 a.m. Door left unlocked. July 7th, 2 hands over until 1:48 a.m. Trash left on table. Took photos. July 8th, opened package addressed to me. Claimed it was ours. Took photo of ripped label. Each entry was fuel. Not just for me, but for the inevitable day someone outside this family needed proof. Mark saw me writing one evening. Eyebrows raised. "You're building a case," he said. "I'm protecting us," I replied. "He thinks he's clever. Let's see how clever he feels when the facts stack up." Ryan, meanwhile, seemed determined to escalate. He used the new keyboard late into the night, the clack of keys echoing down the hallway like gunfire. He ordered more packages, headphones, a gaming chair delivered right to our porch, and opened them like trophies in front of me. "Guess I'll be more comfortable now," he smirked, peeling tape. "Comfortable where?" I asked. He winked. "Here, obviously." The key situation gnawed at me most. He hadn't just made one copy. I could tell by the way he jingled them. The weight of metal in his pocket heavier than before. So one Saturday, while he was out, Mark and I called a locksmith. I told the man, "Rekey the whole house, every lock, every door." The locksmith worked quietly, his van parked discreetly in the driveway. By the time Ryan returned with a greasy paper bag and a soda, the locks were changed. He shoved the key into the front door, twisted, and stopped short when it didn't turn. From inside, I opened it slowly, my face calm. "We had the locks redone. You'll need to knock from now on." His eyes flared. "You can't do that." "I just did," I said. Mark stood behind me, arms crossed. "Keys are for people who live here, not freeloaders." Ryan stormed past us, muttering curses. Unbelievable. "You two are insane." But he stayed. Of course, he stayed. That night, while he sulked in his room, I sat with Mark at the kitchen table, our whispers low. "He's not going willingly," Mark said. "I know. You think Mom will ever back us?" I shook my head. "She's too invested in the story where I'm the villain. She'll double down before she admits she was wrong. So what's next?" I tapped the notebook. "Next, we make sure the world sees what he's doing. Not just us, not just family." The first step was subtle. I left the utility bills out on the counter, circled in red, bold as sirens. I wanted him to see the numbers climb, to know I was documenting. I also started locking the pantry. It was ridiculous, sure. Who locks up rice and pasta? But when Ryan went to grab his favorite snacks and found a padlock instead, the look on his face was priceless. "You're serious?" he demanded. "Food costs money," I said simply. "You want access? Pay your share." He slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. But he got the message. The second step was more public. I began telling the truth outside our walls. Not loudly, just enough. A quiet vent to a cousin here, a frank conversation with an aunt there. Every retelling chipped away at Ryan's victim narrative. The story he'd spun, that I was greedy, cold, unloving, started to crack when people heard about keys, packages, and unpaid bills. I didn't have to exaggerate. The truth was damning enough. The third step was leverage. I researched tenant laws late at night. Laptop blow, harsh in the dark. Ryan wasn't technically a tenant. He had no lease, no written agreement, nothing but his freeloading and mail. I called a lawyer for a consultation, just to be sure. "You're within your rights," the lawyer assured me. "But document everything. If it escalates, you'll need proof." I smiled at the notebook on the table. "I've got plenty." The final step was the trap. I told Ryan, loudly enough for him to hear through the thin walls, that we'd be reviewing house finances at the end of the month. It wasn't a lie, but it was bait, because I knew he'd either explode and prove my point,
or he'd slip up and hand me more evidence. Either way, the notebook would grow. Either way, the endgame came closer. Mark watched me one night as I flipped through pages, my handwriting sharp and furious. "You've changed," he said softly. "Good," I replied. "I'm done being the nice sister. If he wants to play games, he picked the wrong opponent." I looked at the keyless front door, at the locked pantry, at the notebook, fat with proof. The plan was forming, quietly, steadily. Ryan thought he was winning, but he didn't realize every move he made was another step into the net I was weaving. Because revenge doesn't always start with fire. Sometimes it starts with ink on paper, quiet as a whisper. And when the whisper grows loud enough, it becomes undeniable. And the day was coming when Ryan would learn that the silence he mistook for weakness was the sound of the trap closing.
The morning after the blow-up, the house felt like a chessboard at move 20. Fewer pieces, fewer lies I could tell myself, and every square mattered. Ryan sulked from room to room like a storm that refused to rain. I brewed coffee and opened The Record, the notebook that had become both lifeline and weapon. July 12th, 9:14 a.m. Door left unlocked again. July 12th, 11:03 a.m. Opened package not addressed to him. Photo taken. July 12th, 1:40 p.m. Key jingle. Multiple copies. I slid my phone beside the notebook and drafted an email titled House Terms. Written notice. No threats, no heat, just facts. Effective immediately. $200 due on the 1st. No guests without request. Quiet after 10. No duplicate keys. Move out by the 30th if terms refused. I CC'd Mark. I BCC'd no one. Then I did the thing Ryan never expected me to do. I CC'd Mom. Bold, Mark said, reading over my shoulder. Transparent, I said. Let's see if she still thinks this is just about my greed when she can see the math. Next, we took back our house one switch at a time. We renamed the Wi-Fi, split it into 2 networks, home and guest. The guest network required a daily code that expired at midnight. I blocked the MAC addresses of Ryan's gaming setup from home. At noon, he wandered in, controller in hand. "Wi-Fi's down." "It's not," I said, rinsing a mug. "Use the guest network. Code's on the fridge." He punched it in, frowned. "It says it expires." "Correct," I said. "Residents get permanent access. Guests get daily. Simple." He stared at me like I'd just rewritten gravity. "You're ridiculous." "Then sign the house agreement," I said, drying my hands. "Residents get the better plan." He stomped away, muttering. I tightened the other seams. The pantry stayed locked. Staples moved into clear bins labeled with dates and receipts. The whiteboard on the fridge became a contract in plain sight. Quiet after 10. No exceptions. I set a small basket on the entry table with a note. "Shoes and keys here." A joke, almost. A dare. Ryan tossed his sneakers beside the basket and jingled his keys in my face as he went by. He wanted the noise to be the point. I wrote the time down anyway. Wednesday tested everything. His friends texted at 9:12 p.m. Here, I reached the door first. 2 guys with energy drinks and that invincible look of people who believe consequences are for other people. "Ryan invited us," one said. "I'm sure he did," I said, smiling without a smile. I held up a printed sheet. House rules. Guests, in bullet points. Quiet after 10, no open food in the living room, and you leave your shoes and your name at the door. They blinked. "Our names?" "Just first names," I said lightly, handing them a pen. "So I know who to thank if Sauce glues a wing to my furniture again." They glanced at each other, then at the sheet. The quiet stretched. Behind me, Mark folded his arms. Not menacing, present. One guy scribbled something that looked like J. The other mumbled, "We'll just catch him later." And they backed down the steps. A minute later, I heard Ryan's door fly open and slam. He stormed into the hall. "You embarrassed me. You invited strangers into a house you don't pay for. That's embarrassing." He stood there, jaw flexing, then jabbed a finger toward the fridge. "That quiet after 10 thing? Dumb. It's printed and enforced." He laughed. No humor in it. "We'll see." They tested the sign at 10:17 p.m. The clatter, the laugh, the sudden spike of volume that felt less like fun and more like defiance. I walked to the thermostat, tapped fan on to mask the worst of it, and pulled out my phone. Not to film him, to record the decibels on a free app my neighbor once recommended
when a different tenant treated midnight like noon. 58, 62, 69 decibels. I saved the snapshot with time and date. If he wanted to cite rights, I'd cite limits. At 10:31, I knocked on his door. Quiet hours. He's in my room, he shouted. You're in my house, I replied. The volume dropped. Not to silence, to a simmer. I logged it anyway. Mom called the next morning, voice full of scold. CCing me was petty. I said transparency isn't petty, it's accountability. She said, you sound like a boss talking to an employee. I'm a homeowner talking to an adult. And since you were CC'd, did you see the bills, the change of address slip, the keys? She deflected. He's hurting. So are we. You don't see it because you're not here at 2 a.m. locking the door he left open. Silence. Then softer. He says you changed the locks. We did. And he knocks like a guest because that's what he is. She exhaled, a tired sound. This isn't how I pictured family. Me either. But pictures aren't payments. At lunch, I emailed Ryan a clean PDF of the house agreement with a signature line he could tap on his phone. For your convenience, I also attached screenshots, Venmo requests, the decibel readings, photos of open packages, the USPS slip. I kept the tone bland enough to pass in court. Mark read it and nodded. You're building the runway for the landing, or the leverage for the shove, I said. He slid a manila folder across the table, the lawyer's one-page letter on letterhead. It used phrases like license to occupy revoked, and notice to vacate by date certain. It was polite, the way a fire alarm is polite. You sure? Mark asked. I'm sure, I said, but I want him to hand us one last piece himself. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, Ryan texted from his room. I'm not paying. I'll be here as long as I need. Tenant rights. He attached a photo of a blog post. No state, no statute, just bold fonts and bad advice. I replied, not a tenant. No lease. See attached letter from counsel. I attached the PDF. I CC'd Mom. 30 seconds later, his door opened. He stood in the hall, face flushed, phone clenched. What is this? He demanded. A line, on paper, with a date. He read it, eyes skimming, then scoffed. You can't enforce this. Want to test that? Mark asked, stepping beside me. Ryan's throat worked. You're monsters. We're done being victims, I said. He retreated, door slamming. A minute later, I heard drawers yank open, the staccato thud of items thrown into a duffel, then nothing, then the softest sound, the slide of metal against fabric, keys. At 9:58 p.m., there was a knock at our door, polite, uncertain, not his friends. The neighbor across the street, a kind woman with garden hands. Sorry to bother you, she said. We've heard a lot of late noise lately. If you need me to sign anything saying it's been descriptive, she trailed off, embarrassed by her kindness. I could have hugged her. Thank you, I said. If it comes to that, I'll ask. She nodded, eyes understanding more than my words said. Hang in there. When I closed the door, I logged the visit in the record. Your net is working, Mark said. It's not a net, I murmured, staring down the hall toward Ryan's door. It's a mirror. He keeps walking into his own reflection. Before bed, I reset the guest Wi-Fi code, clicked the pantry lock, checked the deadbolt. I paused at the whiteboard and added a final line under quiet after 10. Final review, 30th, 7 p.m. Ryan would see it in the morning. He would sneer, perform, escalate, or fold. Any move he chose handed me more proof, because the trap wasn't teeth and springs. It was time, paper, witnesses, and the simple, stubborn truth printed in black ink. When the last day came, there wouldn't be a scene. There would be a signature, on a receipt, on a notice, on a choice. The shift began small. So small, Ryan didn't notice at first. Or maybe he noticed and thought he could out-stubborn it. Either way, the power started tilting. It began with the Wi-Fi. The guest code reset every night at midnight, like clockwork. One Tuesday, I woke at 2:15 a.m. to the thump of footsteps in the hall and Ryan's muffled curses. He knocked on our door. Wi-Fi's dead, he hissed. It's not dead, I said, not even sitting up. The guest code expired, so give me the new one. It's on the fridge. I already checked. Then you'll have to wait until morning. There was a pause, the silence of someone unaccustomed to being denied. Then his footsteps stomped away. Mark rolled over and whispered, one nail at a time. Next came the pantry. Locked, secure, untouchable. The first time Ryan rattled the door, he laughed, like I was the joke. Seriously, locking up spaghetti? Seriously, I replied, voice flat. The second time, he kicked it hard enough to rattle the frame. This is insane. Respect is cheaper than groceries, I said. The third time, he sulked in his room, leaving a trail of passive-aggressive comments on the fridge in dry erase marker. Maybe I'll eat air. Hope you're happy. I erased them without a word, replaced them with one sentence. Rent due in 12 days. Mark and I coordinated like generals. He handled the utilities, calling each company to separate Ryan's usage from ours where possible. I called the lawyer again, updating him with the growing notebook. He said, keep documenting. Patterns matter. Patterns were everywhere. Ryan's late-night gaming got louder, as if to prove a point. His messes became deliberate. Crumbs spread across the counter like confetti. Cans stacked like a tower on the table. He wanted to provoke. But provocation is only power if someone bites. I didn't. I wrote it all down instead. Mom called daily now, sometimes to scold, sometimes to beg, sometimes just to guilt trip with silence. He's telling me you've become cruel, she said one afternoon. I've become clear, I replied. You used to protect him. I used to excuse him. And what changed? I thought of the brass key gleaming in the kitchen light, of the change of a dress slip, of the moment he smirked and said, family decided. I did. I said finally. I changed. The first real crack came the night Ryan tried to have friends over again. They showed up at 9:30, laughter spilling across the porch. I opened the door before he could. House rules, I said firmly, pointing at the printed sheet. Quiet hours start at 10. It's 9:30, one of them said, grinning, which means you'll have 29 minutes to play. Or you can reschedule. Ryan shoved past me. Don't listen to her. Come in. Mark appeared behind me, arms crossed. House rules apply to everyone, including him. He nodded toward Ryan. The friends hesitated. One muttered, man, this is awkward. And they turned back down the steps. Ryan stood in the doorway, red creeping up his neck, eyes darting between us like we'd staged a coup. You're humiliating me, he spat. You're doing that yourself, I replied. The second crack came through the neighbors. At 8:15 the next morning, Mrs. Jenkins from across the street caught me at the mailbox. Rough nights? She asked gently. You hear it? She nodded. Walls carry. If you need me to confirm anything, noise, traffic, whatever, just say the word. It felt like air rushing into a drowning lung. Witnesses. Not family, not biased, neutral. Objective. When I told Mark, he smiled grimly. That's the beginning of the end for him. The third crack came from Ryan himself. He stormed into the kitchen 3 days later, waving his phone. Look, tenant board says you can't just kick me out. I glanced at the screen. It was a blog post, not even state-specific. That's not law, I said. That's opinion. It's enough, he snapped. I slid a folder across the counter, the lawyer's letterhead clear on the front. This is law. This is fact, and you've got 17 days left. He stared at the letter, jaw tight, before crumpling the paper in his fist. He didn't throw it, though. He shoved it in his pocket and stormed out instead. That night, I heard him pacing in his room. Phone buzzing, whispers too low to catch. Every so often, his voice rose, angry, frustrated. I can't just leave. No, she's bluffing. It's my house, too. The words twisted something in my chest. My house. My house. He'd convinced himself of it, but the cracks were spreading. The first moves of revenge are never dramatic. They're not fireworks or shouting matches. They're small denials, steady refusals, the tightening of a noose you don't notice until it's snug. Ryan still thought he had power. He still spun his key on his finger like a trophy. He still told Mom his version, painting me cold and heartless. But every spin of that key was just another turn of the rope. Every call to Mom was another page in my record. Every stomp, every sulk, every late-night scream into his headset was proof, not of my cruelty, but of his abuse. And when the time came, when the 30th circled red on the calendar finally arrived, the cracks would widen, not because I shouted louder, but because silence, finally, was no longer his shield, it was mine. And silence, backed by proof, would be the loudest weapon of all. The 30th arrived like a storm I had been tracking for weeks, circling the date in red ink, watching it crawl closer, feeling the air tighten with every day. Ryan didn't pack. Of course he didn't. He strutted around the house the last week like a king who believed no army could reach his castle. He left shoes in the hallway, dishes in the sink, keys jingling in his pocket like weapons. But I wasn't nervous anymore. I had the record, thick with dates, times, photos. I had the lawyer's letter. I had the neighbor ready to confirm noise complaints. And most importantly, I had resolve. This wasn't about asking. This was about enforcing. That morning, I pinned the house agreement to the fridge with a magnet. Beneath it, I taped the lawyer's letter. Beneath that, I taped a note in thick black ink. Today is the 30th. Final review, 7 p.m. At 8:12 a.m., Ryan shuffled in, scratching his hair, yawning like a man with no alarm. He poured cereal into a bowl, glanced at the fridge, and froze. "What's this crap?" he muttered. "It's today's reminder," I said, sipping my coffee. He squinted at the papers, then barked aloud. "Oh, right, the eviction notice. Cute. You seriously think you can pull this off?" Mark entered, calm as ever, slid his mug under the coffee pot. "We don't think," he said. "We know." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Oh yeah, okay." But I saw it, the flicker in his expression, the first sliver of doubt. The day dragged. He sulked in his room, blasting music too loud, throwing drawers open, stomping the hall like a warning. I ignored it. I baked bread instead, kneading the dough with slow, steady rhythm. The smell filled the house, warm and homey, the opposite of him. At 5:30, Mom called. "You don't have to do this," she pleaded. "I'm not. I've given him 3 months, Mom. I've bent until I broke. Tonight it ends. You'll regret this." "No," I said firmly. "I'll regret not doing it." I hung up before her sighs could weaken me. At 7 o'clock sharp, the meeting began. Mark and I sat at the table, papers stacked neatly. Ryan strolled in late, gum cracking, smirk in place. He dropped into a chair, legs sprawled. "All right," he said. "Let's hear the speech." I slid the house agreement across the table. "Sign this, or you're out tonight." He shoved it back. "Nope." Mark pushed the lawyer's letter forward. "This says otherwise. You're not a tenant. No lease, no rights to stay. Tonight's the deadline." Ryan scoffed. "You won't do it. You're too chicken." I opened the record. Pages filled with photos, receipts, logs. I laid them out one by one. The change of address slip, the Venmo requests, the utility spikes, the decibel readings, the neighbor's written note. "Every action you've taken is documented," I said. "This is what I'll hand over if you force me to file. Do you really want that on paper?" For the first time, he hesitated. His bravado cracked. Just a hair. He tried one last card. "Mom says I can stay. Mom doesn't own this house. We do." Mark's voice was steel. "And we're done." Ryan's smirk faltered. "You wouldn't actually." I stood, walked to the door, and opened it wide. Cool evening air swept in. "Your choice," I said. "Sign or leave. But you're not staying here tonight without it." For a long moment, he just sat there, gums slowing in his jaw, eyes darting between me, Mark, and the open door. His kingdom had shrunk to a dining table and a pile of papers. Finally, he shoved his chair back. "This is bullshit." He stormed down the hall. The sound of zippers and thuds followed. 10 minutes later, he reappeared, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, face twisted with rage. He paused in the doorway, glaring at me. "You'll regret this," he spat. I met his eyes. "No, I'll breathe." And then he left. The silence afterward was unlike any I'd felt in months. Not heavy, not tense, clean. Mark reached for my hand across the table. His palm was warm, steady. "We did it," he said. I nodded, the weight in my chest finally loosening. We did. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "He's at my place. You should be ashamed." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in months, our doors were locked. Our pantry was safe. And the house was ours again. And Ryan, he was out there, cracks in his armor widening with every step. The execution wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was steady, deliberate, undeniable. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. The morning after Ryan left, the house breathed. Floors settled, windows exhaled, and the refrigerator's hum sounded like a lullaby instead of a warning. I made coffee and, for the first time in months, tasted it. Just coffee. Mark came to the sink, mug in hand. "How's the air?" "Light,"
I said, surprised by my own smile. We got our home back. We didn't cheer. We just stood there, quiet and relieved, like people who finally stepped off a moving walkway they didn't choose. Then my phone buzzed. The family group chat had discovered gravity. Mom, you threw your brother out. Unbelievable. Dad, let's all calm down. Cousin Jenna, maybe there's more to the story? Mom, there isn't. She put money over blood, I typed. I enforced boundaries after 3 months of unpaid living, copied keys, and ignored house rules. I won't debate this here. I attached the lawyer's letter and 1 page from the record showing the pattern. Then I put the phone face down. It kept buzzing. I let it. By noon, Mom posted a vague status about cold hearts. Aunt Linda called to apologize. She said, I saw his eyes during the meeting. That boy wasn't planning to grow up. Thank you, I said, and meant it. We spent the afternoon reclaiming the guest room. We cracked the window and let July heat push out the stale air. I stripped the bed, wiped the desk sticky with energy drink rings. In the nightstand, I found a brass key taped under the drawer with blue painter's tape. A backup to the backup. Mark said, insurance. He held it like a beetle by a wing. I photographed it for the record and dropped it into a jar labeled Misk. The sound it made hitting glass felt final. Under the bed lay a confetti of receipts, wings, games, late-night snacks, spent money in paper form. It felt like sweeping up the trail of a storm that had already passed. At 5, Mrs. Jenkins from across the street brought muffins. For the quiet, she said, smiling. If anyone asks, I'll confirm the nights were loud. I said, you're a saint, she said. Just a neighbor. We hold ropes for each other. That evening, an unknown number texted, you ruined my life. Then, let me in. I forgot my external drive. The bell rang as the second message arrived. He was already on the porch. I answered through the door. Pickup window is tomorrow, 2 to 3. Civil standby if needed. What? You can't keep my stuff. I'm not. I'm scheduling retrieval. Text me a list. He muttered insults I didn't write down. Some things don't deserve ink. He didn't come at 2. At 3:30, on my way, I replied, new window, Saturday, 10 to 11. Box on the porch, no entry. You're insane! No entry. Saturday, he arrived at 10:40 in a hoodie, eyes hard. The box waited on the steps. Drive, hoodie, headset, the odds and ends he'd named. Mark stood beside me, the way a boundary looks when it loves you. Ryan scanned the box, then peered past us into the hallway. Our kitchen. Our living room, our rooms. I could call the cops, he said. They'll tell you it's a civil matter, I said, and compliment the box. For a second, I saw the kid he'd been. Knees skinned, hair sticking up, asking if I'd share the last popsicle. Then it was gone. He snatched the box and stalked off. I logged the pickup for the record, closed the door, and leaned my forehead against the wood. Grief is weird. It's honest, Mark said, kissing my hair. That afternoon, Dad called. Your mother's processing, he said delicately. Your brother left here too. Lasted 1 night. He doesn't like rules. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it for both of us. He'll land somewhere, Dad sighed. I just hope it's not on you again. It won't be, I said. Not this time. For a few days, the drama pivoted online. Ryan posted duffel bag selfies with captions like, betrayed by my own and greed kills families. Friends who didn't know better left flames and frowns. I didn't engage. I posted a photo of the bread I baked and wrote, first quiet evening in months. Grateful. 2 minutes later, Mom sent a voice message. Her voice wavered. He's not at my house anymore. He yelled about the Wi-Fi password. Your aunt was right. I may have misjudged. Can we talk?
A window opened in a locked room. I texted back, yes. Sunday, just us. Sunday came, soft and overcast. Mom sat at our table with her hands around a mug she didn't drink. She looked older and more familiar at once. I thought love meant covering, she said quietly. I see now it means protecting. Sometimes you protect by saying no. Tears rose and didn't fall. I nodded. I needed you to see me. Not just him. I see you, she said. I'm sorry. We didn't fix everything, but we nudged the table back to level. After she left, I carried the last bag from the guest room to the curb, set it beside the recycling, scrap paper, a cracked controller, a hoodie that smelled like a past I didn't want. The wind lifted a receipt and tumbled it into the street. I let it go. That night, we slept with the window cracked. Crickets stitched the dark together. The house was ours again, in sound and in feeling. Near midnight, My phone lit up. A number I didn't recognize. A single text. I want to make things right. No name, no apology, just the promise of a conversation he might still try to control. I set the phone face down and listened to the crickets. I'd learned the difference between a plea and a hook, and I knew the last chapter wouldn't be about him at all. It would be about the kind of person I chose to be after the wreckage.
The house has been quiet for weeks now. Not the tense, waiting kind of quiet that used to crawl under the doors, but the real kind. Peaceful, lived in, soft. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the rhythm of Mark making coffee in the morning. Those sounds are music again. Sometimes I catch myself standing in the hallway outside the guest room, listening to the silence. That room doesn't smell like energy drinks or greasy takeout anymore. It smells like lemon cleaner and open windows. It smells like possibility. We turned it into a study. Mark's bookshelves, my desk, a reading lamp that throws warm light against the wall. Every time I sit down in that chair, I remind myself, this is what boundaries build. Mom still calls, though the tone has softened. She asks how the house is, how Mark is, how I'm doing. She doesn't bring up Ryan much. When she does, her voice wavers between anger and grief. He's bouncing around, she admitted last week. A friend's couch here, a friend's couch there. I don't know if he'll ever settle. I listened, let her speak. Once upon a time, I would have offered to help, to make it easier. But I've learned, some people don't need cushions. They need the floor. Love doesn't mean covering, I told her gently. It means protecting, even if that protection looks like letting go. She was quiet a long time before saying, I know now. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a crack in the wall between us. Enough light got through. Dad called too, in his practical way. Your mother and I argued about this, but I'll say it, you did the right thing. I said, thank you. Dad continued, Ryan's 30 years old. A man who eats wings on someone else's dime isn't a man who deserves pity. He needs consequences. You gave him that. Sometimes I forget how simple truth can sound in another person's voice.
The record sits on a shelf in the study now. I don't look at it every day, but knowing it's there matters. Proof. Not because I need to defend myself anymore, but because it reminds me that silence isn't the same as peace. For 3 months, I lied to myself in silence. I told myself it wasn't so bad, that family meant compromise, that speaking up would make me cruel. That notebook is proof of what happens when you let guilt silence you. And the ending? Proof of what happens when you don't. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's paper, dates, and signatures. Sometimes it's the courage to say no more and mean it. Karma didn't kick Ryan out. I did. Karma didn't rekey the locks, lock the pantry, or reset the Wi-Fi every night. I did. Karma didn't log every noise complaint and package slip. I did. But maybe karma worked through me. Maybe revenge was simply the balance snapping back into place, the weight shifting toward fairness again. The greatest revenge wasn't watching him leave. It wasn't even the silence afterward. It was the strength I found in myself. I learned that protecting my home isn't greed. Protecting my marriage isn't cruelty. Protecting my peace isn't selfishness. It's survival. It's love. It's respect. Sometimes late at night, I think about that brass key, the way he spun it on his finger like a trophy, the way he believed it gave him ownership. That key didn't unlock a home. It unlocked his own downfall. Because a key without respect is nothing but metal. And respect, that's the real lock.
One evening, Mark and I sat on the porch, the sun bleeding pink across the sky. He handed me a glass of iced tea, clinked his against mine. To peace, he said. To boundaries, I added. We laughed softly, the kind of laugh you only earn after surviving chaos. Inside, the study light glowed warm. Our house looked smaller than when Ryan filled it with noise, but stronger too. Not a fortress, a home. Ryan texted once more last week. Just 3 words. Need some help. I stared at the screen a long time. My thumb hovered over the keys. Finally, I typed back, help yourself, and I put the phone down. Because closure doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes closure is just choosing not to reopen the door. If you told me months ago that asking for $200 would unravel my family, I would have laughed. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the lie that family means endless tolerance. Revenge wasn't loud. Revenge was reclaiming what was already mine. And as I sit here now, the window's open, the crickets blankets stitching the dark together. I know this. The sweetest revenge is peace. And peace lives here again.
In the end, my brother didn't just lose free rent. He lost the right to take advantage of me ever again. My home is peaceful now. My boundaries are stronger than ever. And I've learned that saying no isn't cruel. It's survival. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button. Drop your own family drama or revenge story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next one is even darker.